Hello and welcome to today's Partner Web Conference. This is Fast Track Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations Enterprise Edition Tech Talk. Today's topic, PunchOut. Presenting from Microsoft for us today, we have Senior Program Manager Mai Kirknall and Senior Engineering Manager Mehmet Yurdal. So without any further delay, Mai, over to you.
Thank you. So welcome to this Tech Talk where I want to tell you a little bit about our new cool feature, a PunchOut. And it's released in the Dynamics 365 for Financial Operations 7.2 that came here in the early summer. And so the focus of the customers for this functionality is typical customer that want to control where the employees are buying stuff. It's focused on the requisition process, and it's a way of accessing an external catalog and then actually get the exact prices and product information from that. So what we're going to do now is kind of going through a scenario, and most of our time will be in the application. So what is PunchOut? So in our case, it's punching out from a requisition to an external site and then return that information in the shopping cart lines. We can allow the customer to control the access to external catalogs by the internal policies in the Dynamics 365 and the procurement category access. We have based this functionality on the protocol called CXML. So why is this a cool feature? One of the things is that you don't need to hold those products in your own master data and the prices and so on, which vendor you're buying it from. This is simply something that you have a relation with that vendor, so he gives access to a certain part of his web catalog that is dedicated for the customer's employees to punch out to. And getting the accurate prices is very important, and getting the product description is also something you don't need to maintain in your own master data. And so having it through a requisition process and getting accurate prices, you also have a better possibility to control the spend, because it is the actual prices that you're approving. So the whole requisition process in Dynamics 365 is an approval control process. Okay, so this was kind of just a introduction to what we're going to talk about. So let me, before I'm jumping into the application, let me just illustrate the scenario that I'm going to show you. So I have the system-to-system communication illustrated below in my PowerPoint here, and then above I have what is the user actually interfacing to. So they're looking at the requisition, and there is a layer in Dynamics 365. We need platform updates to actually handle this communication, so that's why we have the layer down here. So you're creating a requisition, and then you're punching out to a catalog. It's basically going into that web portal, finding your products, and putting that into the basket. At the same time, you have a punch out happens. So in this case, it's a known web catalog here. You're punching out to that. Of course, it needs credentials and a communication link and so on. We will explain that technical part later in this presentation, so just hold on a little bit with that part. So we are collecting the products and we adding it to the cart in that cart, and then you are simply checking out. So this is a quote type of thing. You're not placing a real order. Whether the vendor is logging that in his only quote system, it's really up to the vendor. It's not something that Dynamics 365 can control. But of course, you can communicate different types of information via in the CXML punch out message about if you're logging different things about the user that's punching out. But we're getting back to that later on. So once the basket, the products are selected, you are returning back to Dynamics 365, and you're doing that with a post-back message. It's holding all the lines that you have collected in that external catalog, and so you're kind of going into an intermediate state where you're looking at the lines and then evaluating those, and I can come back to that, what possibilities you have to update those lines. And at the end, you're adding them to requisition when they are prepared, and this is the lines you want. And then basically you are submitting the requisition to the known process in Dynamics 365. Okay, so that's it. So let's go down to the application here. So what I've done is that I'm taking this employee self-service workspace. We have the concept of workspaces in Dynamics 365, and it's actually a place where you have a lot of tasks that is related to, in this case, the employee. And so the purchase requisition tile doesn't come out of the box, but it's very easy to go in and add a tile to a workspace. You go into the purchase requisition list page and then simply make a tile. So this is what I've done for this demo. So I have the purchase requisition that's prepared for this user. So let me go down to that once. Okay, so this is the purchase requisition prepared by me. And I will create a new one here. I want to buy some cables for my new office. So nothing new here. This is the standard requisition that we have seen it as all the way back to when Dynamics 365 for operations was born. Okay, so here you have the lines of the purchase requisition. And what we have done, we have added a action on the line here, external catalogs. When I click on that one, I get up a dialog with some different informations in. Just to get an introduction, we have a concept of a preparer and a requester in a requisition. And the preparer is the one that's kind of punching out in the requisition, but this person could also prepare a requisition or for on behalf of somebody else. So it's actually, I can be the administrative personnel in a company that is preparing requisitions for one person in a department. So if I had that permission, I would change the requester here so it's not myself. And the reason why I'm saying this is that depending on who's the requester, which buying legal entity it goes to, all these information are going into purchasing policies that is explicitly let's say telling or resolving into what categories it is that I have access to buy to. And those categories can determine which product catalogs I can punch out to. And when I'm showing you how you're setting up these external catalogs later, I will show you how you map procurement categories to external catalogs. So, but in this case, my demonstration will just be that the requester is a preparer. Another thing is that if you are looking for specific categories, you can enter computers or whatever, and then the list of catalogs will filter, so you only get the catalogs in which you can get the specific category. So this is some things about which catalogs are actually appearing for you to punch out to. Good. So next step will be that we are punching out. And while we're doing this, it has been very important from Microsoft perspective that we want to explicitly explain that now we're leaving the Dynamics 365 for financial operations product and going out to a page that's hosted by somebody else that we don't have control of, you can say. So now we'll be redirected to the external site. Okay, so this is and of course, depending on what catalog you're punching out, it will look different. This is not okay. So we'll go in and buy some cables here. Have some. Okay, and add to my card. And I'll continue shopping here. I can add as many lines that I want, of course. It's not responding, so there it is. It is working. And just take some little time. Add to cart here. So, okay, so while it's thinking, I think I would say that the 2 lines will be to the cart. Oh, here we go. So, so I added 2 here. I clicked a double of times, and here's 1. So of course, I can continue. I see I have the price here and the totals, and I have the product description. So now I'm checking out. So if you remember the animation that I showed you, now I'm transferring the shopping cart. While I'm doing that, it's actually posting back the message via the CXML protocol into Dynamics 365. Yeah, and here we go. So here I have my 2 lines, quantity 1 and quantity 2, and I received their external item number here, and it's a good thing for referencing later because it's basically go into the purchase order when that's eventually created as well. So the first thing I want to do is I want to update the procurement category, and of course, if it's different categories, I can select every line, but I can also say I'll bulk update the lines if they fall into the same category here. So this is desk accessory, I'm updating also. So the procurement categories here is some categories that's defined internal in Dynamics 365. They might not match exactly procurement categories that is defined by the vendor. So that's why we need to have the person that's receiving here mapped to the categories that are applicable in the Dynamics 365. That can have implications on the further processing and so on, which accounts it's posted to and so on. Okay, so I also want to say that there could be potentially issues, and that those type of issues will come up with the small icons over here where you can hover over, then the user will get some hints of what the problems are. But if the system is set up correctly, those issues will not appear. It will typically be that if you have gone up to the web shop and found items with another unit that is recognized in Dynamics 365. So when you are setting this up with the vendor, you need to know what kind of units the vendor's web shop would return back to you and make sure that this is configured correctly in Dynamics 365. Another thing could be the currency. Let's say you're shopping in Australian dollars in the web shop, but the Dynamics 365 only know US dollars, then you'll also get an error. But you shouldn't get errors if the system is configured correctly. Okay, so now we have prepared the lines here, and of course, I mean, you can remove the lines. It's only quotes that you got from the vendor. It's not the real order as such. So really, if you want to continue with only 1 line, it's perfectly okay. And that's what you can send into the approval process. So here we're adding to the requisition. And as you can see down here, the line type is external catalog items. That means that you explicitly protect, maybe in a workflow process, if you want to branch out based on that conditions, you have an indication, at least here, where you can set a condition up based on this one. You can also see that you have a full item description down here coming from the vendor, the product name, and the external item number. So. Okay, and you of course have the unit price, and here's the vendor account that we have mapped to the product catalog. Okay, so I think that's basically what have been changed in 7.2 for the requisition part, because the next step will be that you are submitting this to be approved by whoever is kind of set up in the approval workflow to approve this requisition. And of course, when it's approved, you will continue and create the purchase order. Okay, so that's for that part. It's the kind of the punching out. Now I will tell you a little bit about the setting up of external catalogs here. So I have a page called External Catalogs, and here I have already created a new one, a test catalog, and I can give it a name, of course. And so when I map it to vendors, it's cross-company. So we are selecting a party, and a party can have different roles. It could be that the party is vendors in multiple companies, and then you will be able to see it here in the roles section. In my case, this datum receivers is only created as a vendor in USMF. That's why I only have one line here with the legal entities. If I had multiple legal entities, then the catalog will be present in that context. Do you remember on the requisition line, I could say with buying legal entity it is in? So based on that buying legal entity, we'll actually map, okay, is the vendor present there? And then it could potentially show up. I can also, for a certain legal entity, I could prevent the access, so it's not necessarily all the legal entities that the vendor is present that the catalog is shown. The next step is that it requires that the vendor is approved or being prepared, at least approved in specific categories. So I need to map procurement categories to the catalog here. So in my drop-down, I'll get the categories that the vendor is approved in. In this case, there was only one, very simple. So I'll just map that category to it. Next step could be that you want an image. So you will have a possibility to upload an image for the catalog here. And as you saw before, there was an image on that dialog I came up to. So this is simply just new, and then upload one of the images that you have on an accessible file share, and then it would upload here and be displayed on the dialog here. So that is for me what I want to tell. I want to hand it over to our senior engineering manager, which will tell you a little bit about how to set up this punch-out request and the technicalities behind this functionality. Yeah, Mehmet, it's up to you.
Thank you very much, Mai. Hello. So this part will be a little bit more technical. Let me first go back to the presentation to show what I'll be talking about. So I'll be talking about what's under the hood for our PunchOut feature. So our PunchOut feature is, as Mai was mentioning, based on the CXML protocol made by Ariba, which is a very widely used e-procurement protocol. It has many flavors, it has many functionality, but we have taken the part which does the PunchOut itself. And basically, the main issue we have seen while trying to implement this is we had to take out the previous versions protocols OCI and AXCL and replace it with CXML, which is now more widely used. and that required us to do some changes because basically we had to allow some anonymous redirection back from the external sites. I will explain a little bit further, of course, back into AX or back into Dynamics 365 for operations. And this required us to do some platform changes because by nature of the cloud solution, we don't really want to allow anonymous redirection back to the system. So for this purpose, we did some platform changes which have the circulating endpoints which change with each session. And by this way, we can connect back from the external sites to this one-time endpoints. And as such, we can return back the baskets back to the system. The reason I'm explaining this is because that requires us to have a platform dependency. So we have an explicit platform dependency to platform update 4. So I'll explain a little bit about how we do the communication with the external systems. I will explain around this the security and eventually the extension story, which can help you extend the solution a little bit further. So let me go back to this. So as Maya was showing, we have this configuration, external vendor, external catalogs form, where you can basically do the main configuration. So to this form, we have multiple roles. The role which can actually do the technical setup for external catalogs for the CXML is actually the IT admin. So we actually specifically want the IT admin, and we grant the IT admin the permission to go and set up the CXML protocol. As you can see on this form, there's a extra tab here, which is, as I said, TPA protected, so only accessible by the IT admin, which includes the CXML setup request XML. When you create a new record, by default it will put down a sample XML, which can be used for kind of inspiration or setting up the format. But in general, what we expect is the customers or the super users from the customer side to actually communicate with the external vendor to understand what they need for their CXML exchange protocol, and based on that you will get a CXML XML file to actually insert here. I will go through a little bit about what this CXML covers and what are the important fields, but you should know that what we are defaulting here is only the setup initiation request and only has the minimal amount of fields which you definitely will have to extend. So if you look at the CXML setup request, you will see that it's a well-defined XML. Ariba has the definition and has different versions. It's a format which is still under progress, so they keep adding different things and different versions, and different vendors, external vendors, will have different requirements. The main fields that are important in this one is the information about from. So describing where from where the CXML file is being initiated from. The to information is basically where the target is, and then you will have a shared secret, which is essentially the secret used for getting into the system or getting into the external website. And that's the reason we are actually doing TPF protection here, because this file actually contains the credential information which is used throughout the company to the shopping. So we don't want to kind of share it with all others in the system. We just want to have a centralized control over it. And also some other runtime change information, such as the buyer cookie, which is shared cookie, a secret cookie, which enables us to identify that there's no third party in between. And there's a form post URL, which is the redirection URL, which we overwrite in the runtime. And there will also be a URL for the external website. So again, this will be pretty much negotiated between the user and the external party, and then there can be many more fields added to this, and we recommend checking the CXML white paper, where they describe all kinds of different fields that can be added, like more information about the items being transferred, addresses, contact information, so on and so forth. One extra information I would like to share here is that to be able to make sure that the file format is okay, there's DTD validation possibilities. So Ariba supplies DTD files, which does schema validation. However, we didn't want to include schema validation here through DTDs because there are some security issues with it. They can actually execute scripts in the system if you do DTD validation from an external party. So we still recommend once you define your CXML file format to go and do the DTD validation through Ariba's DTD schema files. We have though introduced one more validation possibility, which is this button over here. It's called Validate Settings. So once you set up your CXML file, you can click on this button, which essentially does a simplistic version of the PunchOut and shows that you can actually go onto the external website and you can actually log into their system. So this is in order to validate that you can do the PunchOut without having to go to the purchase requisition form. So with that, let me switch over to my presentation to explain a little bit what's going on in terms of the flow. So once the IT admin or the responsible person sets up the CXML session initiation request message, what's happening is that I would like to punch out, right? The PunchOut is a handshake protocol. So when we go through the purchase requisitions and we say let's punch out, it will send the first CXML file, which is what we show over here, to initiate the request with the external party. Once this file is sent over through HTTPS, and we do enforce HTTPS throughout to ensure there's encrypted communication, so you cannot really enter any URL which is not HTTPS, as a side note. It sends the encrypted session initiation request to the external party, and the external party will send back an acknowledgement saying either it's successful or it failed. If it is successful, we will create a PunchOut session in the system and we will redirect the user to the external website. So the user will do the shopping on the external website, they will finalize, they will click the checkout button as Maya was showing, and then the response will be redirected to an endpoint that's listening anonymously in AX, but as I said before, it changes with the sessions, so there's not a single endpoint that can be attacked. Again, in HTTPS, once we receive the message back and the user logs in, it will be parsed back into the proper format and will be put into this basket format that is displayed in the basket form. Once the basket form, as Maya was showing, the user completes the actions on the basket form to make sure that the categories are selected and everything is defaulted properly, you can just click the finalization button and you will get the purchase requisition created from the basket. As a side note, you will also be able to see multiple requests or multiple baskets in case that you, for example, you timed out or you closed the form by mistake. You will be able to access multiple requests from the same form, and we have also enabled that you can actually go back and see the request from a different menu item, so that you can always go back and clean up if you have something which is dangling or if you want to kind of process the previously made requests. So in a nutshell, this is the flow of the PunchOut from the external point of view. As I said, I want to again iterate that this is all HTTPS and encrypted, and we enforce so you will not be able to use anything which is not HTTPS based. Thus, it's kind of important that the external parties also respect this. So let me go back to our extension story.
Maybe before extend, we could take a question
Sure,
that's coming,
absolutely.
because they ask what are the prerequisites to know the authorizations, and I think that was, parts of the XML that you were explaining there. Which part? What is the real essential parts that they need to get from the vendor in order to?
So there will be a shared secret, that's the password, and then there will be an identity which is the username. the main information which is needed, which we don't overwrite, is the shared secret, which is the password and the username from the external site. And the URL over here is basically for the external site to punch out. So these are the essential information. Yet we have seen in different cases vendors asking for some more information, like for example, who's punching out, what's the username, the email address. So there's some extra validation that the external sites are doing. Those ones will be added to this format. I'm going to explain the extension story. And those have to be filled, but again, those are specified by the external parties, so it's not. It will be kind of important for understanding, you know, what are the requirements from the external party to be able to tell exactly what fields are needed. Is there any other question?
Yeah, because we could take it. You can. I think we should go through.
So I'll quickly explain the extension story because, as I said, the CXML protocol is quite flexible. So it allows addition as long as the CXML is properly formatted, it allows quite a lot of addition. There are some preset fields, but there's also a possibility of adding completely custom fields, which are called extrinsic fields. So these extrinsic fields allow you to add information like username, email, whatever is not actually in the protocol. You can add them to the CXML file. So we have enabled so that you can add extrinsics in 3 different ways. One of them is through adding them statically to the CXML file itself. So you can basically go and you can, in the CXML, type statically, okay, well, I want to now have, I'm not able to type, but you can actually just add different tags here to say, okay, well, this is basically, I want to statically populate as an information. So as a part of each CXML setup request, it will send this value statically. So this one way of extending. What could be used for? What could this be used for? Company name, all kinds of static information which you want to communicate. This could be a part of the static changes.
Maybe that one of the questions is relevant for your. They are asking, is it possible to share the CXML setup format template?
So format template, this is the minimal version. This is defaulted immediately when you create a new record, so it is shared. But again, there's a white paper out there from Ariba which has many different examples. And then I think the actual example is needed from the external party. So they will have to provide, okay, well, this is the minimum requirement that we have, and they should provide the example. So,
but I guess also, I mean, if you have your template in a notepad or something like that, it's basically a copy paste into this. So this the area here where you see the default XML, this is basically open for editing, so you can just remove it and then copy it back. So this is kind of the sharing.
Yes, exactly. So I'll proceed then. So there's another possibility of adding extrinsics, which is through this tab over here, or this control you can see over here, where you can add some more dynamic extrinsics. Basically, if the main problem that we are trying to address here is that in the runtime, sometimes you cannot just use static values. You want to also be able to use values which can change and get populated in the runtime. So for that purpose, we have made some defaultly supported values that you can make. So you can basically add any name over here which gets as a tag. And then we have introduced 3 values, which is username, user email, and a random value. We have seen in multiple tests that we were doing, some external providers, they wanted to have, for example, a random value, which identified, for example, the session ID. So it is useful to be able to put a tag with a random value. So we have enabled that. Another one was username. So they specifically asked for a username field. So you can actually do this, which takes the current user's name and posts as a part of this CXML request. And it also now supports user email. So if I click this, it will also pass user email as a part of the CXML initialization request. These are the default ones we have added for now. That being said, this is done in using sys extension framework. So you can actually add more enums and more values which can populate in runtime, but this will require, of course, some code change. Yeah, is there a question?
Yeah. So one of the relevant question here is how can you troubleshoot the CXML PunchOut integration? Is there any? So I assume if you go this, for example, the validate setting, wouldn't you get some messages back from when?
So I mean, there's some validation over here. As I said, there's some HTTPS validation. So as a part of this, if your URLs are not correct, then it will also give some validation messages. It will also validate some parts of CXML if it is not correctly formatted. But as I said, one of the validations is through DTDs to ensure that the schema is valid. And for that, there's a lot of online tools where you just put the DTD file from Ariba for your version that you want to use with your external party. You can see here, this is the version of the CXML. So you find the relevant DTD file, which is a schema validator, and there are external tools where you just put them against each other, and then it shows you if there's any actual format issues. Another way of validation is you try to punch out to the external party, and if the external website is somewhat configured for it, they will actually give you some error details. They will tell you, okay, well, this is wrong, or your password is wrong. So again, using this button, if your format is correct, it will try to punch out to the external website, and then on that website you will see some issues. Again, as I said, the requirements from different external sites are different. Like some of them ask for a username. In those cases, you need to really negotiate, or you really need to check with them to see what kind of fields are needed. So if there's no questions, I'll continue. So these are the extrinsic. So the last way of adding extrinsic or custom fields or runtime populated fields is, of course, doing code changes. Again, the whole thing is implemented in Sys extension framework, so you can check the code where you can add to hook points some extra field population logic. So if you always need to add item ID, for instance, you can do that through code, and you can basically add it as a part of the extension framework and say, okay, we'll always populate the item ID as a part of the session initialization. We can definitely provide more info if needed. The last way of extension beyond this is basically extending the PunchOut feature by another protocol apart from CXML. So a lot of the implementation is, of course, based on the CXML protocol. However, we have implemented, as I said, through Sys extension framework. So there's possibilities of adding extra tables, adding extra code to add the new protocol. But the main bottleneck is on the punch back, so getting from the external party back into the system, because that goes through the platform layer, and that requires platform changes. Of course, it's not very easy to customize platform code. That's why we have done a prototype. One of our solution architects has done a prototype where we are basically using a microservice in between, which essentially acts as a relay. Which means that you take the message being sent back from the external party, and the microservice essentially parses and sends the data into the relevant table on the application layer in AX, and does what the platform code is doing for us right now. So that requires some kind of credential information and proper communication channel between the microservice and AX. However, as long as the table on the application layer is populated properly, all the rest of the logic will work. So as long as there's a small microservice which can translate the external format, the new format, into the understandable format that we expect, it is possible to add new protocols. And there's some example that you can find which is out there. So this is pretty much under the hood. If there's any questions, then I can answer them right now.
Yeah. So one question which I wanted to say for now is that have you plans to include the rest of the CXML integration story, approved purchase orders, transmission via CXML to support the suppliers, for example? And I'll say the answer is this, that we know that there is a long process here, and actually also for invoices to get back. And so of course we're always struggling on where to put our resources, but a really good idea if this is makes sense or relevant for customers, then please go into our ideas portal and give it a vote, because we have it in there. So yeah. Okay, so so there is an extra one. I guess there is no logging of the CXML message stored within the or 365 for operations. There's no logging of the CXML message. Is that?
Didn't quite get what we mean by logging. Logging of the message which we received from the external party.
Might be a history. That's why.
There's a table which we save the messages that we get back, but again, I mean, we don't necessarily show it anywhere in the system, so there's no logging as such.
Okay. So we can just give it one more minute for questions coming, and I think we as far as it goes now, we have answered the questions that have come in, and if
All right, thank you, Mai. All right, while we wait for any lingering questions to pop in, I'd like to bring your attention to a survey that I posted in the messages panel. That's a link to a short survey for this web conference. We ask that you please take a moment before logging out to access it. We hope that you found today's information helpful, and if you enjoyed today's web conference or have feedback on how we can provide you with a better event, this is your chance to let us know. The survey scores are on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible. And with that, I think we do have at least one more question, so I'm going to turn it back over to Mai and Mehmet.
So one thing is that the question is it coming up in the coming release? So this PunchOut is actually in the spring release already. So if you mean the coming release, the next release in the fall, then I mean, good luck for you, because I mean it's already there, so you can use it right away. So
7.2.
Yeah, it's in the 7.2.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's one pending question again. No, it's not. It was a feedback on one of the other questions. So I think, Denise, it sounds like that we are ready to close the session here.
All right. Thank you, Mai. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to conclude today's web conference. Attendees may access the web conference recording via the same registration link used to attend today's live broadcast. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters, Mehmet and Mai, and thank you, audience, for logging in and joining us today.